Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources.
The spectrum identifies your preference, not your proficiency. You can be really good at something that's completely out of alignment for you, and it's because you've done it a lot. I'm a really good filer. I know my ABCs really well because I've been doing it for years and years, but I hate filing. And just because we're good at something doesn't mean it's something we should be doing or that is going to be easy for us. It's going to take more spoons, more energy, more effort when we're doing something outside of our type, even if we can do it. I can do a lot of things, but the stuff that really lights me up, that really feels easy to me, is showing up and being the talent. And when you recognize that, you can start to build your business so that those opportunities come up for you more, and you're doing less of the things that pull you out of that zone of genius, so to speak.
You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zawrotny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a productivity coach certified in positive psychology and stress management. Join me as we explore ways to live a more proactive, positive life with episodes on productivity, self-awareness, mindset, entrepreneur life, habits and systems, simplicity, fun, and more. I understand overwhelm personally as a multi-passionate entrepreneur, wife and mom to kids and cats, and as a caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and today we're chatting with a fellow multi-passionate about building a business that works for you. If that sounds familiar, it's because the same phrase, that works for you, is what I use for creating systems to help you be most productive and ultimately the happiest, best version of you. I called this podcast Positively Living because our goal for being productive extends beyond doing. It's the quality of our lives that matters, whether we're building businesses, creating art, loving family and friends, or exploring the world. Positive psychology helps us understand that leaning into our strengths will yield a more fulfilling life. And isn't that what it's all about? When we take these same principles and apply them to building a business, we can see tremendous results. Our guest today, Robbin Young, helps us see how we can do that, especially as creative entrepreneurs. And spoiler alert, she says we're all creative. I agree. Lisa's an award-winning speaker, best-selling author, and accomplished musician with multiple albums to her credit. She's the host of Creative Freedom and founder of Ark Entertainment Media, a growth consultancy for maverick micropreneurs who want a business that works for how they're wired to work. She believes that the best way to be successful is to be yourself, warts, sparkles, and all, so that you can own your dreams without selling your soul. In our conversation, Lisa and I cover creative types and a spectrum we all fall under. We talk about finding our ideal entrepreneur zone and about the choices we make to be in our zone of genius and our zone of excellence, which relates to the book, The Big Leap, which you can find on the favorites page of the website where I put all the books we talk about on the podcast. When we build a business and a life we love, we need to work and to push. There's a practical side to it, so it does involve that. But when we work in alignment, our experience can be, as Lisa says, less effortful and more effortless. I've included some additional episodes in the show notes that support this conversation, including one I mentioned with Rachel K. Albers. There's various perspectives on branding, being a serial entrepreneur, and planning seasonally. I think the most important takeaway for this conversation today is something you've heard me say before. Find what you love and what you do well, which are often one and the same, and do more of that. That's your best place to focus. Productivity, success, and fulfillment will follow. And if you aren't sure how to make that happen, I'm here to offer additional support. That's what I do as a productivity strategist and accountability coach. I invite you to book a free discovery call with me so we can go over what's going on and see if we're a good fit. Every call I've ever had has ended with the person feeling less stressed, so right there, it's worth the chat. Message me directly or book the call directly on the Connect page of my website, positivelyproductive.com/connect. Now, let's join Lisa to talk about the best way for creative entrepreneurs to build a business. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast, Lisa Robbin Young. I am excited to talk to you today.
I am really happy to be here. It's nice to talk to another Lisa. We are so few and far between now.
We are, and we have a lot in common, which will come out in this conversation. But before we dig into what I am super excited to dig into, which is this idea of how, as creative entrepreneurs, we can best build our business, I'd love it if you'd start us off by telling us a bit about who you are and who you help. And my favorite part of this question is, what lights you up?
Oh, well, they're all the same answer, sort of. I am, at the core, a performing artist. I have performed my entire life, and that's what lights me up. I have been on television. I have been on stage and screen. I have recorded 3 albums. I've written multiple books. The creative impulse is just how I'm wired. And years ago, I started accidentally, as so many of us do. I fell into coaching, started working with clients, helping them build businesses that worked for how they were wired to work, doing what they loved, having something profitable and sustainable, doing what they loved. And over the years, it has evolved into specifically micro business owners and creative entrepreneurs. And about 30 to 40% of my clients at any given point in time have capacity constraints, typically around multiple marginalizations, right? So they've got chronic illnesses or disabilities or something that precludes them from working in the traditional 20th century work style, whether that's a regular job or a 40-hour work week or whatever. They just can't do that. And so I have spent the last nearly decade now helping people really hone in on how they're uniquely wired and how to make things work for wherever they fall on the creative spectrum and the capacity spectrum.
I love that for so many reasons, because if we do it that way, right? If we find the way we're wired and we lean into that, I think even more goodness comes out of it than simply getting the things done that we plan to do. We're so much more fulfilled. We're more productive. Things happen that we could never even imagine.
Yeah, one of the things that I talk about with my clients is, instead of ROI, I talk about ROR, right? Return on all your resources. Because yes, you can invest money or you can invest time in something, but you're also investing effort, attention, and energy. And if the things that you're investing and pouring out into whatever it is you're doing, whether it's a relationship or a job or a business that you're building or anything, if you're not getting a positive return on that, you can only overdraw the account for so long before you're bankrupt. And so we have to be doing things that are filling us up, not just financially, but energetically, emotionally. It improves our focus. It improves our well-being. That's what I'm looking for when I'm helping my clients figure out what enoughness looks like for them.
Yes, energy management is huge, and we show up differently. And that is the whole point too. We show up, I would say, better as our best selves, right? But then also differently. And here's the key, is being willing to step away from what everybody else is doing. Let's not worry about that. Let's focus on us. A number of amazing conversations on the podcast. And for some reason, I really want to bring up Rachel K. Albers right now, because
Yes.
I know you have collaborated with her as well. And this idea of, oh my gosh, just because you can do it or just because others are doing it doesn't mean we have to. And I think stepping out and calling out all of these messages and all this information that's being tossed at us is so critical, so that we can find the quiet and then find the answers for us.
Especially when you're in the early stages of entrepreneurship, it is very common, just like children, to look to our models and go, that's what they're doing, so that must be what I have to do. Right. And to a point, that can be very helpful and it can work. But there comes a point in every entrepreneur's life, just like when every child grows up, we have to cut those apron strings and go, okay, but this is my path. This is the way that works for me. And I like to tell my clients, so long as it's legal, You can do it, right? And then it becomes a question of, does it work for you? Does it align with your ethics and your sense of integrity? Does it align with your values? Because there are lots of things in the world that work. Some of them are terrifyingly effective, right? Some of them usurp your sovereignty. Some of them are very manipulative. Some of them are very borderline sketchy ethical, right? But for some people, that's totally okay with how they're wired. And for other people, it is very much not. I work with the very much not end of the spectrum because for me, business isn't just about making money. For me, I want my clients to become better humans, not just better money makers, right? Better contributors to society in a financial way. I want them to have lives that feel good and know that they are doing good at the same time.
100%. And one of my major frustrations is this constant cold messaging that I'm receiving where it's like, wow, you know what I got out of that message from you? That you could not care any less than you do at this point about me as a human. So can we just not? I'm going to ghost you
Right.
and move on. So yes, I am with you in that camp of wanting to live better, be a better human, connect with each other on a deeper level. And I truly believe that ultimately it's more fulfilling for all of us. So you've touched upon a couple of things already as creative entrepreneurs, and I would imagine there's a lot of connection. You mentioned having multiple marginalizations. And so it's no surprise then that I too tend to work with very similar people as well who have found a limit with the traditional ways and now need to look for different solutions. And when everyone else is, in my case, spouting off the traditional productivity stuff, they're like, but wait, it's not working for me. What's wrong with me? Not a damn thing. Come on over here. Let's talk. You're doing something similar here. So creatives, when we go from, I think, the creative to the entrepreneur, what are you seeing as the big challenges to build a business?
I have this core belief that all entrepreneurs are creatives, but not all creatives are entrepreneurs, right? We have to have some level of creativity in our being in order to innovate and be entrepreneurial. But people who are creative, and we are all creative, I really believe that too. We are all creative. Not everyone wants to do that for their livelihood. So they're not entrepreneurial. They're just creating. Maybe they sell stuff sometimes, but that's not what the primary purpose of their creation is. When you are in a space of your creations, your ideas, your innovations are your livelihood, you are a creative entrepreneur. So you don't have to be artsy creative. I talk about an entire spectrum of creativity on the creative entrepreneur spectrum. And there's one end of the spectrum that I call the chaotics. They are the ones that we typify as quote unquote creatives. They are experientially focused. They are usually a little bit perfectionist in nature. They're all about the wow factor and how things look and feel. Okay. They're wired for that type of experience. So that's why you see a lot of designers and painters and dancers and singers, because that's all of the emotive side of the creative spectrum. But on the opposite end of the creative spectrum, we have what I call the linears. These folks are creative in their own right, even if they don't always identify as creatives. These are your pattern finders. These are your interior designers, your thought leaders, your accountants and model makers, right? These are the people who are creating frameworks because systems and processes and rules are the order of the day for them. It's a different kind of creativity, but it's still creativity. And those two ends of the spectrum don't always see eye to eye and don't always understand one another. And that's why there are folks like me who stand in the middle. We are the fusion creatives or the cusp types who have strengths on both sides of that spectrum, but we can't stay in one of those camps for too long because we start to feel unmoored if we spend too much time in the chaotic, and we start to feel too weighted down and too imprisoned if we're spending too much time in the linear world. We have to flex back and forth because that's how we problem solve. That's how we see the world. So there's all of these different types of creativity, and it's recognizing where you fall on that spectrum and then building something that really supports you to lean into that strength versus trying to be all things to all people and wear all the hats and be the bottleneck in your business.
As a fusion creative myself, I'm going to quote Jeff Harry and say, preach. Yeah, you totally deserve a preach on that one. Yes. And may I say, I extra delight on behalf of the pattern finders and the especially people who I think traditionally have not claimed the creative title.
Yeah.
Like, although I have to say that my accountant is often creative. I'm kidding. Please don't come after me. But
hey, as long as it's legal, right?
And we bring it all back around. I love how you did that. But to that point, though, I will play with words and will use other words. So I do use the word innovative a lot. And I think that that is another great word when you think of yourself in that way, that serial entrepreneurs and innovators. Yeah. I mean, we're constantly coming up with new ideas where we play or what we're using as our paintbrushes or, our crayons or whatever. They're different tools, but it's still absolutely a form of creativity. So you talked about this spectrum and, of course, those of us hybrids. So it's a delight to be here with you. I think at one point you and I were talking about different creative types or maybe a certain number of them. Was this the creative types that you're talking about, or do you have other maybe like subdivisions within that you've witnessed?
The only division that I haven't really talked a whole lot about are the cusp types. So technically there are 5 types, but the cusp types lie between fusion and chaotic or between fusion and linear. And the interesting thing about these folks is that when the chips are down and they have to solve a tough problem, they lean into that primary type. So a linear cusp, when the chips are down, they're going to go, well, what do the numbers say? What's worked in the past? Let's look there to solve the problem. Versus someone who's a chaotic cusp, when the chips are down, they're going to say, well, how does it feel? What is my gut telling me? What is the divine leading me to do here, right? I'm open and I'm willing and show me the path, right? Fusions will flex either way. It's like, well, what does this situation call for? That's where I'm going to go. I'm going to go into the linear because this is a numbers problem that needs to be solved by looking at the numbers. This is a people problem. I'm going to solve this problem by talking about the emotions and looking at what the feelings are and the experience is of this. And then I'll assimilate those things and figure out for myself what's the best path forward for me based on the information. The data, it's technically data from both sides, but it's different kinds of data. And we assimilate that and process that, and then we step forward.
Okay, so as I understand it, we have the spectrum with the chaotic on the one side, the linear on the other. The fusion is the classic hybrid, hello. And then you have the points in between, if you will, those cusps, so that they would be able to adjust to either be a fusion or, let's say, a chaotic. But when the chips are down or when you need a default or a go-to, they default to that one side.
Yes, very much. On the surface, they look like a fusion. They operate very much like a fusion until things get hard. And when things get hard and they feel really stuck, they're going to lean into that primary type, whichever one it is.
Interesting. I wonder how much overlap there may be with how you're describing this and this framework and the idea of the Enneagram and how you have, a certain tendency in one direction, but then you actually like go across the graph, if you will, when you're in stress response.
Yeah, I think the only ones that demonstrate that type of shifting are the cusp types as far as my spectrum goes, because there is no, in the research that I've done, there is no purely chaotic person and there is no purely linear person. It is a spectrum because as children, we are exposed to and taught and learn a diverse array of topic matter, right? So I may be naturally wired for math and science, but something happens in a music class and I get really excited about music and that scooches me over on the spectrum a little bit. So I'm not as linear as I once was, even though music can be very mathematical. Or I've spent a lot of time in the creative arts world. Steven Tyler grew up sitting under his father's piano, who was a classically trained, Juilliard pianist, spent a lot of time there. And then he discovered he had ADHD, so he had to learn some coping skills and mechanisms that were a bit more linear to keep him on track doing things, right? So the spectrum identifies your preference, not your proficiency. You can be really good at something that's completely out of alignment for you And it's because you've done it a lot. I'm a really good filer. I know my ABCs really well because I've been doing it for years and years, but I hate filing. And just because we're good at something doesn't mean it's something we should be doing or that is going to be easy for us. It's going to take more spoons, more energy, more effort when we're doing something outside of our type, even if we can do it. I can do a lot of things, but the stuff that really lights me up, that really feels easy to me, is showing up and being the talent. And when you recognize that, you can start to build your business so that those opportunities come up for you more and you're doing less of the things that pull you out of that zone of genius, so to speak.
I was just about to bring up the big leap, and it definitely sounds like you're talking about the zone of genius. And one of the things that I have often said when having a conversation, when talking to my clients, is that sometimes when we are trying to find what's absolutely the best for us, whether we're trying to be more productive in the sense of how I describe it, of living more, not necessarily doing more, whenever we're searching, I think actually that the zone of excellence can be the most insidious for us.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because you're right. I am absolutely competent in a lot of different things that maybe I shouldn't be doing necessarily or as much, or let it block what is best for me to do.
Yeah, and sometimes what happens is because you're really good in that zone of excellence and that zone of excellence feels so comfortable, it becomes a set of golden handcuffs. It becomes hard to walk away from the things that you're excellent at because maybe there's more challenge in standing in your zone of genius. It's easier to be there, but it's not always easy to get there. And so it's the getting there. Maybe there's a networking opportunity that you have to step into to meet the right people that are going to put you on the path. And you've got introversion issues or you've got fear of connecting with people issues. I had phone phobia for a very long time, could not pick up a phone and call people. And it was learning how to pick up that phone and reach out and connect. Now I have other ways of doing it, but back in the day, you had to use a phone. It was getting over that hump that got me to the next level in my business. Once I got there, it was like, oh, this part's the easy part. So we have to recognize that sometimes we have to go through some of the things that are painful and difficult or challenging in order to be able to spend more time in our zone of genius. It's not always about, oh, let me just let go of those other things. And I think we can look at that chart of competence, incompetence, excellence, and genius and be like, well, I'm shooting on myself. I should be in my zone of genius all the time. Well, that would be great. And for most human beings, that's not realistic because we've got life to live and we've got things to do and we've got other people that we're interacting with who will pull us intentionally or unintentionally out of our zone of genius. And we have to be able to navigate that. I look at, I can't drop names because I have an NDA, music superstar that I worked with who had this agreement on, these are the things that you will and won't do in my presence. Because, and I mean, some of them seem like they were ridiculous. You will call me by my stage name, or you will not call me by my stage name when I'm not on stage, you know, all of these things. And we look at that and we go, that's really crazy. That's kind of ridiculous. But to that person, when you call them by their stage name, that's a switch that turns on for them to be in that mode. And when they're not on stage, they don't want to be in that mode. They've got to turn that switch off. So that's where you call them by their street name. And don't cross the two because then you're messing with their head. And that person is running a $500 million enterprise that employs a whole lot of people to keep that machine running. And if you take them out of their zone, the house of cards will fall. You know, then there's all this time that has to be invested in getting them back to where they need to be. And so I give them props for creating an environment of empowerment that allows them to stay there. And to us lay people who are looking at that, we're like, that seems excessive. Well, when you're running a $500 million organization, you get to decide what's excessive. But for the rest of us who have these day-to-days and we can't have a whole cadre of folks policing how people are behaving around us, we have to recognize that, yes, there will be times when we have to step out of our zone of genius, and we just have to learn how to navigate that so that we can keep moving closer and closer and closer to spending more time there as much as possible.
I feel like you have touched upon so many different things. I mean, obviously, we've talked about the different areas in terms of excellence and genius, the different zones, right? And the idea that there can absolutely be challenges to get where you're meant to go. And that's the practical side here, which I love and I live in quite a bit because There's the ideal day that we have and then what actually happened. It reminds me of the memes of, this is how it started and this is how it's going.
Right.
And so being realistic to that, being realistic to the fact that, let's say, I'll use my family as an example. I adore them and I love serving them in the capacity that I do. I'm a wife and mom. That may sound traditional, but I will also say that it's one of the best feminist flexes ever to be able to say, hey, I love doing this, so I do. Now, I am also running my own business and my podcast and doing the things that I love, and we are finding that harmony. But because caring for them, looking out for them, being there for them is something I value so deeply, I have to make sure that my choices are in alignment for that. And yeah, sometimes it is this is the best choice based on risk, right? You talked about ROI, I love the ROR, the resources, but the true ROI in our lives is like, well, what do we need to do here? What needs to happen for our best situation as a group? And that may be different. You are also talking about boundaries. It can seem extreme in the big star mode, but also I wonder sometimes if it feels extreme to us because so often we are allowing our boundaries to be so loosey-goosey, right? That we can't even anticipate how they're doing that. But to your point, if you have to switch on and off, if you have to move from point to point, you need to have a structure in place. So there's a lot that you're talking about here, and I would love to bring it back in kind of a simple walkthrough of, okay, I'm listening to you right now, Lisa, and I'm like, yeah, I'm a creative entrepreneur and it's been challenging and I'm kind of bouncing around. What is your guidance today to, first of all, is it easy for me to figure out like where I hover in this spectrum? I probably know, but is there anything I need to know about being clear? And then how do I proceed?
Yeah. So on my website, you can take the free assessment. I mean, you don't even need to opt in. I feel like it's that important for people. Go take the quiz, find out what your type is. And that will give you a beginning understanding of where you fall on the spectrum, some of the challenges and strengths of your type, and things that you can do to shore up where you're at right now. It also points to some examples out in the wild of celebrity types that are also that same type so that you can kind of look to, oh, this is somebody modeling that for me. And now I can start to identify with this is what it looks like when this person is showing up on that type in the wild. And then once you recognize that that is your strength, that is how you are wired, then the next step is to look at what is going on in your life and your day and see where you are out of alignment, where the disconnect is. Well, I'm spending a lot of time doing linear activities, but I am a chaotic creative. Well, then maybe it's time to start asking for help to get some of those tasks to not be what you're doing all the time, right? Delegation, automation, systematization, deletion of these responsibilities, reassigning them, redistributing the workload, so to speak, so that the people who are wired for that are doing it. I have a client whose husband is so linear, and I love to talk about this. He made a spreadsheet for all the leftovers in the refrigerator, and he loves doing that kind of stuff. And she's much more on the chaotic end of the spectrum. She's like, honey, that gets to be all you. You get to run the numbers. You get to do all of the financials. You get to do the website builds. You get to do all the tech on the back end. And he's just like, this is great. And she's like, this feels so much more expansive because I thought, because I was the business owner, I had to do all of this. I'm like, you've got a built-in partner who loves that stuff. Let them help you. Accept the help. And fusion creatives, we are notoriously bad at asking for and receiving help. Practice. Start small. Baby steps are still steps. We want to keep doing what we can because the momentum will start to build and the space will start to open up. And you'll go from this tight, tense ball of nerves into this expansive, ease-filled, you're doing the things that matter, that are yours to do, and you have people that you can trust to do the other things that are also important. We cannot do this by ourselves. I don't care what anybody says. We have to sometimes. We have to pick and choose and be like, okay, I'm the solopreneur, so I'm going to do these things myself. But when you get to a point, as soon as you get to a point where you can start asking for help in drips and drabs, in whatever size and amount you can afford, take it. because we are interdependent human beings. We were not designed to be independent creatures. We were designed to do some things on our own and rely on our communities of support for other things. And the more we re-embrace that idea, the easier business development is on the whole. So that would be my advice.
Yes. And I'm thinking of an example for myself, and I've used it before, and I've used it in the context of productivity, but in whatever context you're talking here, you're talking about that shift from finding better alignment and that shift from what you're doing because you have to, or you think you have to, or you're capable, or, any of those reasons,
Right.
and shifting more into the things that you do best, that you are wired for, and allowing others to do that. And the first time I did that was in hiring a bookkeeper for my business. Now, I can crunch a number pretty well. I am quite analytical, again, being one of them fusion folks, but I'm not happy doing that, and especially when it comes to the other things. So that was a learning process for me. I was like, wow, something that you described so beautifully, that you start with that tension, and even just physically, Lisa was like scrunching up her body, and you could see we have that when we are forced to do the things, or we believe we have to do the things in life, let alone our businesses. And then the more that you're able to free that up, the more open and expansive was the word that you used. And I love that feeling. You can even feel that moment where you're breathing easier. I do know, though, that my obligers, and they're ones that I work with quite often, can struggle with this, right? To ask for the help. But I want to remind you in this moment that the things that you love to do, or that people have asked you to do, that you love, and you're so excited to help them to do that thing, it's so easy, that's what it is for them. Right. So not only are you opening up for yourself, you are giving someone else an opportunity to work how they're wired and be in that zone. And the zone that you're talking about, or the description that you have of that expansiveness and that alignment, is that what you would consider the ideal entrepreneur zone?
Yeah, because the truth is, if you're an entrepreneur, there's always going to be something that's requiring your effort or your attention, right? Because it's a business that you're growing or maintaining in order for it to be healthy. And so the work doesn't go away. The work changes, and the goal is to have it feel more effortless, less effortful and more effortless, so that there's some ease and flow. Because there will be times, and I call this compassionate hustle, there will be times when you've got to get on the hamster wheel and you've just got to go because you've got a deadline you've got to hit, or a commitment that you've made that you don't want to break, and you're going to go all out to make that thing happen. That's fine, and that's a part of business. But if you live there, that is not sustainable. We have to get off the hamster wheel. We have to be able to rest. We have to be able to breathe. We have to feel supported in the work that we're doing, whether that's from the financial remuneration that we're getting, or from the people on our teams that are supporting us, or our family support. If we don't feel supported and we don't feel safe, we don't take the necessary courageous action steps to move things forward. So we have to be coming back to that place of restoration and refilling and refueling before we then step back out and go do again. Enoughness comes from that place of, I have everything that I need and all is well in this moment. That's enoughness. And we all need that.
That's a meditation right there. That's a mantra right there that you can absolutely repeat. And again, the parallels delight me in that I refer to productivity that I do as compassionate productivity. And what I talk about with that bit of hustle that you're talking about, that happens, right? Especially as creative and innovative serial entrepreneurs, for all the new ideas, all the things, the bright shiny objects. And it's very exciting and wonderful. And sometimes after you have made sure that everything's in alignment and you have chosen and you're like, I got to get this ish done, you do what I refer to as a sprint. Right? And that's great. Those do need to happen. And I mean, even in the traditional productivity world, you have people like Chris Bailey, who was his own guinea pig for a lot of productivity techniques and the extra hours thing, right? The overtime, if you will, for a week, let's say, even. That can work. But what you're talking about that we have to be so cautious about is the chronic approach to that. Because there's a distinction between a sprint, a push, right? A temporary jump in activity, in energy that you're doing for a purpose, but you know it's temporary. It's not the norm, it's the exception.
Right.
And if you keep doing it as the norm, that's what leads to burnout.
And the other side of that coin is when you push that hard, when you turn up the volume to 11, at some point you have to back off and you have to rest. So knowing that you've done this push, you have to have time on the other side for recovery. We don't go to the gym and work the same muscle groups an hour a day, every single day. Those muscle groups need to rest. So we alternate what we're doing in the gym. Even if we're going every day, we're working our arms today and our legs tomorrow and our back the next day, and then we go back to our arms, right? You can't continue to fatigue the same systems over and over again because they will fail. You have to give them time to heal. You have to give them time to restore and replenish. And the same is true for your body as much as it is for your business.
Yeah. And your mind and your soul. And to that point, a good bit of advice is not only to allow for a sprint as necessary, but to do your very best to actually decrease from the norm. If you think about it like a chart where it's spiking up and then you have kind of your average amount of time that you're working or the effort that you put in to actually after that, it's not the rest time, like actually extending that a bit for recovery from the sprint. Because we also need recovery from the day to day. You never need to be worthy of or to justify rest.
I tell my clients, resting is doing something. Taking care of yourself is doing something, right? Those are necessary components. The reason the body is wired for sleep is because the body needs sleep. If it didn't need sleep, it wouldn't happen every single day. So we have to give ourselves the benefit of the gifts of who we really are, and rest and recovery is part of that.
I love that. And I love that as a place for us to wrap up. Any other thoughts? Anything else that you're like, I wish we would have talked about this?
The thing that I really like to drive home for everybody listening is, more than anything, it's important to hone in on what really matters to you as a human being. Judy Garland said, be a first-rate version of yourself instead of a second-rate version of someone else. And the only way you can do that is to really take time to get to know who you are and what really matters to you. Everything else comes out of that. So do the work. Do the work of knowing what really matters to you and how you're wired so that you can have more of what you really want.
Yeah, it becomes your filter for your best life. Absolutely. Love that, Lisa. Okay, before we get into our rapid wrap up, we're going to have a little fun there. Would you tell us where we can find you online?
Absolutely. My website is lisarobinyoung.com. Robin has 2 B's. If you mistype it, you won't find me.
And we'll make sure to have that in the show notes to make it even easier. So I'll have that set now. Let's get into it. I'd love you to fill in the blanks for me, please. So a song that lifts my spirits, makes me dance is?
Happy, Pharrell Williams.
Love that so much. Even though my kids were like, that's gotten old, Mom. I'm like, not to me. I love it.
When it gets old for me, I just put on Weird Al's version, which is tacky, and it's just as much fun.
Oh my gosh. Weird Al with the save yet again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a quote or mantra that inspires me that I love to share, besides the Judy Garland one, which is fabulous.
My mother told me when I was very young, the answer is always no if you don't ask.
Yeah. Now there's life advice. Okay. Now, how about a resource? It could be a book, an app, anything at all that's made my life better.
So many good things. I would say I'm going to do a shameless plug for my own book, The Secret Watch. It has helped me because I had to write this book and the journey that I went through to get to it. But it helps so many other people because it's a parable, so it's an easy read. And we talk about how to define success on your own terms. So this magic pocket watch opens up once a day and it gives you this magical inscription, and you have to go through life. And so the story is of this graphic designer who goes on this journey with this watch, and it's a beautiful unfolding. And so many people over the years have said, how touching, but also how effective it's been for them to help them get clear on what really matters to them. So.
I love that you shared that. You shameless plug away here, and I'm delighted to put it on my favorites page where every book, resource things that we talk about on the podcast, I try to get on there to make it easy to find. So it'll be there. And I have one more bonus question for you. It's a last but definitely not least kind, and that's, what are you grateful for today, Lisa?
Oh, I'm grateful today for lots of things, but the specific thing that I'm grateful for today is my physical therapist. She gave me a little bit of extra love this morning and made it possible for me to get up and walk around. So I had surgery last fall, and it's been a challenge to be mobile since the back surgery. And I'm just really grateful that there are magical hands in the world that can help with the healing.
Yeah, I'm going to take a moment to say the same, that physical therapists and massage therapists and all those healers out there, oh, how we appreciate you.
Yes.
And along the lines of gratitude, I am also so grateful to have connected with you, that you reached out and that we could do this together. So thank you, Lisa, for shining your light so brightly in this world and for sharing it with us.
And thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.